The river had swollen black and angry from the storm, its surface thrashing with foam and uprooted branches. Daniel Holt reined his bay, gelding at the ridge, staring down at the torrent below. The year was 1867, and Arizona Territory was a place where death and fortune often came in the same breath. He should have turned his horse south, back toward the trading road. Instead, he caught sight of something pale caught in the current. At first he thought it driftwood, but then the shape lifted an arm, thin, desperate, clawing at air. A girl. Apache by the look of her dress, though it was plastered tight to her body by the water. She clung to a broken log, her face barely above the foam. He swore under his breath. He had no reason to stop. No law bound him to the girl. The Apaches were no friends to men like him, and he'd learned enough in his 30 years to know saving one could mean killing yourself. Still, his hands were already moving, knotting his lariat to the saddle horn. "Damn fool," he muttered, spurring the gelding down the embankment. The horse plunged into the mud at the river's edge, hooves striking sparks on hidden stone. Holt wrapped the rope tight around his waist and lunged forward, cold water swallowing him whole. The current hit like a charging bull. It dragged him under, slammed him against rock, tore at his arms. His lungs burned before he broke the surface again, coughing river into the sky. The girl's dark eyes fixed on him, wild with terror, then went glassy as the current yanked her down. He kicked hard, teeth clenched, forcing his way toward her. The rope burned at his waist. He caught her wrist just as she slipped beneath the foam. Her skin was ice. The log twisted between them, smashing against his ribs. Pain flared, but he clung to her, wrapping his arm around her waist. He signaled the gelding with a tug, and the animal strained backward, dragging them inch by inch through the current. Holt's boots scraped gravel, knees buckled, and then they collapsed onto the shore, tangled in wet rope and weeds. The girl lay on her side, coughing river water, her black hair plastered to her face. Holt rolled onto his back, chest heaving, vision blurred by river and exhaustion. He had done it. He'd pulled her from the jaws of the San Pedro when the river wanted her bones. Her fingers clutched his shirt with surprising strength. She whispered something in Apache, voice ragged, and held on like she feared he'd vanish back into the flood. He couldn't make out her words, but her eyes never wavered. "Easy now," he rasped, but she did not let go. The gelding stamped nearby, steam rising from its coat, the only sound beyond the raging water. Holt knew he'd just crossed a line he couldn't see, a line men didn't return from. By dusk, Holt had a fire lit in a hollow sheltered by cottonwoods. The girl sat close to the flames, her soaked dress steaming in the heat. She had said nothing more, only watched him with unblinking eyes. He'd seen that look before, on wolves, cornered but unbroken. She was no child, 16, maybe 17, young, but old enough to carry the weight of her people's law in her gaze. He cut strips from his jerky and placed them near her. At first, she didn't touch them. Her pride was a fortress, even after nearly drowning. Finally, hunger cracked it. She ate with sharp, quick motions, as though expecting him to snatch the food back. Holt studied her by the firelight. There was something in her face, narrow features, high cheekbones, that tugged at a memory. His sister's face years ago, before the river took her. Sarah had been 10, playing too close to the water back in Arkansas. He hadn't been fast enough. That guilt had ridden him west, all the way to this desolate land, never letting go. Maybe that was why he'd leapt in. Maybe saving this girl was the penance he'd never been granted. She caught him staring and stiffened. For the first time she spoke in broken English. "Ode." The word hung in the fire's crackle. He frowned. "What do you mean, Ode?" Her hand pressed flat to her chest, then pointed at him. "Life, Ode." He shook his head. "No, you don't owe me anything." Her eyes narrowed, as though he'd missed the point entirely. She repeated it, softer this time, almost like a vow. "Ode." The fire snapped, sending sparks into night. Holt turned his gaze outward, toward the river valley now cloaked in shadow. He told himself she was only grateful. That's all. But unease crawled his spine. There was weight in her tone, weight he didn't understand. The girl finally laid down, her head resting on her arm, though her eyes still glimmered at him through the smoke. Holt poked the fire higher, trying to chase the cold settling in his chest. The land was too still. No coyote howls, no wind through mesquite. Silence like that never boded well. The horse whickered softly, ears twitching. Holt rose, rifle in hand, scanning the darkness. The fire threw long shadows across the cottonwoods, each one shifting like it had a life of its own. Then he saw it, a figure at the ridge, a tall silhouette frozen against the moonlight. Another joined it, then another. Silent watchers. His thumb cocked the hammer back. "Stay close," he whispered, though the girl had already risen to her knees, eyes calm, almost expectant. The night exploded with a shrill whoop. Arrows hissed through the dark, one thudding into the tree just above his head. Holt dropped to one knee and fired. The report shattered the silence, echoing through the canyon. He racked the lever and fired again. Sparks lit the ridge as his bullets struck rock. Shadows melted away, then reappeared farther down. The attackers moved like smoke. Holt's heart hammered as he scanned for the next target. The girl did not scream. She stood behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder, not holding him back, not urging him forward, just there, steady. Another arrow hissed past, so close he felt the wind of it on his cheek. He swung the rifle, pulled the trigger, and saw one of the silhouettes drop. The others slipped back into the dark. And then silence again. Just the fire crackling, just the river, whispering through the night. He kept the rifle raised, breath hard, sweat cold on his back. But no more arrows came. Whoever they were, they'd vanished into the hills. The girl's hand tightened once on his shoulder, then fell away. She looked into the shadows without fear, like she knew what lingered there. "Friends of yours?" he asked bitterly. She said nothing, only returned to the fire and sat, her eyes still scanning the darkness. Holt remained standing, rifle ready. He didn't like this, any of it. Dawn's light began to creep over the ridge at last. He let his rifle lower, but his guard never dropped. The girl turned to him then, her expression unreadable. She reached out, touched two fingers to his chest, right over his heart. Her voice was low, certain. "Life yours." He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "No, you've got that backward. I saved yours." But her eyes never wavered. The sun edged higher, painting the land gold. He didn't know it then, but he would remember her words until the day he died. Because in her tongue, in the law of her people, it was not gratitude she spoke. It was claim. She had not given him her life. She had taken his. The trail bent south through a canyon lined with red rock walls that glowed like embers under the morning sun. Holt rode slow, his bay gelding skittish with every echo. The Apache girl rode behind him on the same horse, silent, arms looped loosely around his waist. He didn't like having her pressed against him, not because of fear, but because of the weight of her silence. She hadn't let go since the night at the river. He told himself he was taking her to the nearest settlement to wash his hands of this business. Yet every mile carried them farther into Apache country, where white men vanished like dust in the wind. They crested a rise and Holt reined in. Below lay a scattering of wickiups and smoke curling from small fires. Children darted between them, women grinding maize, dogs barking. The sight twisted his gut. He'd stumbled headlong into an Apache village. Almost instantly, riders poured out from the brush, half a dozen warriors with lances and bows, their ponies kicking up dirt. Holt's hand went to his rifle, but the girl pressed her palm to his chest. Her voice was sharp. "No." The warriors surrounded him in a circle, eyes hard, weapons leveled. Holt sat stiff in the saddle, pulse hammering. He'd seen this before. Men dragged from their horses, scalped before their last breath. But something strange happened. The girl slid down from the gelding, standing tall despite her soaked and torn dress. She lifted her chin and spoke in rapid Apache, her voice clear and commanding. The circle of riders eased back a pace, eyes shifting. One of them, older, scarred across the cheek, rode forward. He studied Holt like a wolf sizing prey. Then his gaze dropped to the girl, and his sternness softened. "Nalin," he said, her name rolling from his tongue like a prayer. The girl, Nalin, answered him with words that Holt could not follow. But when she gestured to Holt, all eyes swung toward him. The scarred warrior dismounted, his movements deliberate. He spoke halting English. "She says your life, hers." Holt frowned. "That's not how it works. I pulled her out of the river. She's alive because of me." The warrior's eyes narrowed. "In our law, in the old way, one who is saved may claim the one who saved. His life is hers until she releases it." The words hit Holt like a blow. "That's nonsense." The Apache man shrugged, unimpressed by Holt's denial. "Not nonsense. Law." Nalin's dark eyes pinned Holt, fierce and certain. She repeated in broken English, slow enough even he could not mistake, "Your life, mine." He wanted to argue, to laugh it off, but there was nothing in her face to suggest jest. She meant it, and worse, every warrior around them accepted it as truth. Holt had come to rid himself of her. Instead, he'd been bound tighter. They led him into the village like a guest who was also a prisoner. Holt's rifle was taken, though they left his revolver, a sign they didn't yet see him as enemy. Still, eyes followed him everywhere, children staring, women whispering, men scowling. They gave him a place near the central fire, and the chief arrived not long after. He was tall, hair streaked with gray, his presence commanding without need of words. This was Nalin's father, Holt guessed. The chief listened as Nalin spoke, her voice carrying urgency and authority. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he nodded once, grave. Then he turned his eyes on Holt. "My daughter says she pulled you from death, same as you pulled her. She says your life belongs to her now." His English was careful, deliberate. "She's wrong," Holt said flatly. "I don't belong to anyone." Murmurs stirred the circle of warriors. Nalin's face remained still, but her hand tightened around the amulet at her neck. The chief raised a hand for silence. "Do not refuse too quick. You walk among us. If she had not claimed you, maybe others say kill you." The words chilled Holt. He looked around, saw the way some warriors' hands twitched toward their blades. He understood then. Nalin's claim wasn't a chain around his neck. It was a shield. But Holt had never lived with chains. He had drifted from Arkansas to Missouri to the far edge of the frontier because he couldn't abide being owned by anything, not the army, not a boss, not even guilt. "I didn't ask her to speak for me," he said. "I'll walk out of here on my own 2 feet." One young warrior stepped forward, fury in his eyes. "Then you walk to death, white man." Tension coiled, thick as rawhide rope. Holt's hand itched for the revolver, at his hip. He could take 1, maybe 2, before the rest cut him down. But Nalin spoke, her voice sharp, cutting through the heat. She moved between Holt and the warrior, her chin raised. Words tumbled from her mouth, like stones striking steel. The warrior stopped, lips tight, and withdrew. Holt stared at her. She had defied her own for him. The chief studied his daughter a long time, then finally nodded. "It is done. Your life belongs to her. You will go where she goes, until she says you are free." Holt wanted to spit in the dirt, to walk away. But he saw the ring of warriors, felt the knives of their stares. He wasn't free. Not here. Not now. He sat stiff, rage simmering under his skin. He was a man bound not by rope, but by words he didn't understand. And yet, beneath that rage, a sliver of unease crept in. Because part of him knew, without her claim, he might already be dead. The argument was still thick in his blood when the first shot cracked through the air. A boy dropped near the fire, his maize spilling across the dirt. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then hell broke loose. Gunfire thundered from the ridge above the village. Raiders, white men, Holt realized, stormed down the slope, rifles blazing. Smoke and screams filled the air as women pulled children toward cover. Horses shrieked in panic. Instinct took hold. Holt threw himself toward his gelding, snatching the rifle the Apaches had taken and left stacked against a post. He chambered around, sighted, and dropped the first raider he saw charging toward a woman. Dust and blood filled his nose. Warriors rallied with bows and lances. But the raiders had repeating rifles, their shots tearing through the camp like thunderclaps. Na Lin darted past him, dragging a child to safety. A raider lifted his gun toward her. Holt didn't think. He fired, the man spun and fell, and Na Lin froze, her eyes locking with Holt's in that instant, not with fear, but with something fiercer. Another wave hit. Holt ducked behind a wiki-up, firing again and again until his shoulder ached. He fought beside Apache warriors, the same men who had eyed him with hatred moments ago. Their arrows and his bullets whistled together, cutting down the invaders. But the raiders were many and they pressed hard. Fires leapt through the village, smoke choking the air. Holt's ears rang with screams and rifle shots. A bullet whined past his ear close enough to tear a line of heat across his skin. Through the chaos, he saw the chief battling two raiders at once, his lance whirling. Holt swung his rifle and dropped one, the other falling under the chief's blade. The attack seemed endless, but at last the raiders faltered. Those still breathing fled, leaving their dead sprawled in the dust. The village smoldered, its people bloodied but alive. Holt lowered his rifle, chest heaving. He looked at Na Lin. She stood across the firelit ruin, her dress streaked with ash, her bow clutched tight. She met his eyes and gave the smallest nod, as though to say, "This is why." Later, when the fires were smothered and the dead mourned, the chief came to Holt. "You saved my daughter again. You fight with us. Now you ride with us." Holt's gut twisted. "I don't ride with anyone." The chief's gaze was unyielding. "The raiders will come again. They saw you fight. They will not forget your face. You are marked same as us. You ride or you die alone." Na Lin stood beside her father, her eyes never leaving Holt. She didn't speak, but her presence weighed heavier than the chief's words. Holt looked at the burning ruins of the camp, at the bodies of raiders and Apaches alike. His freedom had ended the moment he dragged her from that river. He holstered his rifle, jaw set. "Then I ride." The night fell heavy and cold over the canyon, the stars sharp as flint against the black sky. The fire John had built sputtered low, its glow washing his face in flickers of amber. Across from him, the Apache girl sat silent, her dark hair loose, her gaze fixed on the shadows just beyond the fire's reach. Her name, he had learned, was Nayeli. The word meant, "I love you," in her tongue, though there was nothing soft in the way she carried herself now. She was taut as a bowstring, and John knew the night had teeth. The coyotes sang from the ridges, their cries thin and mournful. John's rifle lay across his knees, the wood worn smooth from years of use. His last horse, gone. His only food shared. His life now tangled with hers. He wanted to ask why she had claimed him, why she had stood before her people and said he was hers to protect, when the day before she'd been nothing more than a stranger drowning in a river. But he held his tongue. In the silence, the questions were louder, and his heart beat like a drum calling out answers he wasn't ready to hear. At length, Nayeli spoke. Her voice was low, threaded with grief. "My brother died where you found me. He was swept under the water. I cannot save him. You pulled me out, but his spirit," she trailed off, eyes shining with something unshed, something burning. "Now the elders say you saved me for a reason. A life tied to a life." John frowned, shifting in the dirt. "I didn't mean for none of this. I just saw you go under." She looked at him then, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "The river chose. You took him. Now you belong to me." The words struck harder than any bullet. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and finally looked away to the fire. Belong. He had never belonged, not to a town, not to a family, not to anything but the empty miles of the frontier. Now this girl spoke, as if fate had written his name alongside hers. Before he could answer, the night shifted. A snap of twigs, a whisper of movement. Nayeli stiffened. John's hand was already on the rifle, thumb brushing the iron of the hammer. The sound came again, closer this time. Figures in the dark. Men. He smelled them before he saw them. Whiskey, sweat, powder. Then a voice hissed, rough as gravel. "That's him. The one with the girl." Shadows surged from the trees. rifles catching the light. White men, 5 of them, their eyes cold and greedy. Bounty hunters or worse. John rose fast, rifle leveled. Naeli scrambled back, clutching a stone blade she pulled from her sash. Well, the lead man sneered, stepping into the glow. His face was scarred, his hat low over his brow. Looks like the river's been kind to us. Apache girl's worth something to the soldiers. And you, Mr. Hell, you're worth a bullet if you get in our way. John didn't wait. He fired. The crack split the night, and one man went down hard. Then the world erupted. Bullets hissed through the air. Sparks burst as lead struck rock. Naeli shrieked, but not in fear, in rage. She darted forward, slashing her blade across one man's thigh, sending him howling. John dropped another, working the lever of his rifle quick and sharp, each shot a hammer of survival. But there were too many. A gunstock cracked against his ribs, driving the breath out of him. He staggered, swung the rifle like a club, smashed it across a jaw. Naeli drove her blade into another man's shoulder. Blood sprayed, screams, smoke. Then the leader caught John square in the face with his fist. Stars burst behind his eyes. He stumbled, hit the dirt hard. His rifle skittered away. Boots closed in. The man raised a revolver, cocking it slow, a grin splitting his scarred face. Any last words, cowboy? John spat blood into the dirt. His chest burned, his vision swam. Then he heard it, the wild whistle of arrows cutting the air. 3 shafts slammed into the leader's chest, driving him back before he could fire. Another arrow found the neck of the man who had cornered Naeli. He crumpled, gurgling. The clearing filled with riders, Apache warriors pouring in from the ridge, their war cries splitting the night like thunder. John blinked, stunned, as the last of the raiders fled screaming into the dark. Naeli knelt beside him, her hands pressing to his chest where a bruise already blossomed purple. She met his gaze, steady and unyielding. "They came for me," she whispered. "Now they will come again. But you are mine, and I will not let you go." John closed his eyes against the ache in his ribs, against the weight of her words. Somewhere in the night, the river still roared, carrying secrets and souls alike. And in its endless voice, he heard the truth. His life was no longer his own. The dawn came blood-red, spilling light across the canyon like a wound. John stood weak, but alive, leaning against a boulder while the Apache gathered around their fires. Naeli stayed near him, her presence as constant as his own shadow. Her people eyed him with suspicion, some with open hostility, yet none dared move him from her side. The tribe's war chief, an older man with hair silvered by time, stepped forward. His gaze was sharp as flint. "You fought. You bled. You stood beside her. That makes you bound." John wanted to speak, to say he hadn't chosen any of this, but the words withered on his tongue. Instead, he lifted his eyes to Naeli. She met his look without flinching, her face unreadable, but her fingers brushed against his hand. Light, fleeting as though she, too, knew the weight of what had been spoken. The day stretched long. The tribe moved swiftly, breaking camp, preparing for the danger that would surely follow. Soldiers, bounty men, others who'd seen the fight and wanted blood or coin, they would not be far behind. John saddled, a horse lent to him by the war chief, the animal restless beneath his hands. He felt the eyes of the Apache on him at every moment. An outsider, a trespasser, yet somehow one of them now. By mid-afternoon, the trail wound into the high country. Pines closed overhead, their scent sharp and resinous. Every hoofbeat echoed like a drum in John's chest. He rode beside Naeli, their silence heavier than words. He thought of the river, of the way she had looked at him when she claimed his life, and he wondered if she truly believed it, or if she had simply needed a shield in the chaos of grief. But as the sun dipped low, the truth came for them. A rifle cracked. The rider beside John pitched forward, blood spraying from his back. More shots followed, echoing from the cliffs. Ambush. Men poured from the rocks. Soldiers this time, their blue coats flashing in the fading light, sabers gleaming. Chaos erupted. Horses screamed. Arrows flew. Smoke clouded the air. John fired from the saddle, dropping one soldier, then another, his heart pounding like a war drum. Naeli rode hard, her bow singing, every arrow finding flesh. But the soldiers pressed in. John's horse stumbled, took a bullet to the chest, and went down. He hit the ground, rolling, pain screaming through his limbs. A soldier charged him with a bayonet, and John barely raised his rifle in time. The blade skidded off the barrel. He swung, cracked the man across the skull, dropped him. Another came. Then another. John fought like a cornered wolf, blood hot in his veins, every breath a battle. He saw Naeli drag from her horse, soldiers closing on her. Rage tore through him. He bellowed, charging forward, firing, striking, clawing his way toward her. And then silence. The soldiers pulled back, their captain raising a hand. Smoke cleared. John staggered, chest heaving, blood soaking his shirt. Naeli knelt in the dirt, two soldiers gripping her arms. Her eyes found his, wide and defiant. The captain spoke, his voice cold. "This girl is wanted. She belongs to the United States now. And you," he looked John over, sneering, "you'll hang for standing with her." John's vision blurred, but his jaw tightened. He took one step forward, then another, though his body screamed with pain. His hand still gripped the rifle, though the barrel smoked and his strength waned. Naeli's voice cut through the stillness, sharp as steel. "No, he belongs to me. His life is mine. And if you take me, you take him too." The soldiers shifted, uneasy. The captain frowned, but in that moment John felt the world tilt, felt the weight of every choice, every chance, every breath since the river. His life was claimed, his fate entwined, and though death stood waiting just beyond, he knew one truth, as certain as the rising sun: he would not let her go.